it's a little terrifying because you absolutely cannot miss.
Goalies now are completely at a premium.
Not, right? Like, Canada doesn't have a ton of great options.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Hockey News Big Show. I'm your host, Katie Gaus, joined by Michael Traikos and Ryan Kennedy. And we are deep into the heart of the NHL offseason. Summer is in full swing. So we want to take this episode to look at the best of the best, the top 100 players in the NHL right now. And you guys did an issue. It actually came out back in April where you had this list of all the top players highlighted by Nathan Mackinon, number one on the cover of the issue, kicking things off. So let's start right there. Why was McKinnon chosen for your number one? And we've got lots of good discussion about who's on the list, who's not on the list. But let's start with the top. Let's start with the big dog, Big Nate.
Yeah, so, it was a very interesting list and very much about, what was happening at the time, talking about, it was heavily weighted for the 2024-25 season. Nathan McKinnon obviously had an outstanding run, ended up second in NHL scoring to Nikita Kucherov. Had to play without Mikko Rantanen for most of the season after Rantanen was dealt and still put up big numbers. And, it's no shade to Connor McDavid. I feel like with those two, the past kind of 5 years or so, they've really gone back and forth in terms of these dominant, complete players in the NHL. But I did find it interesting. I was at Canada's U17 camp this week, and I had a chance to speak with Alexei Joseph, who was the number one overall pick in the Quebec League draft. This kid is, he's 16 years old. He's already 6'4", 200 pounds. And he plays with a lot of speed and power. And I asked him afterwards, I was like, who are the NHL players that you like to watch? And he said, Nathan McKinnon. And it's like, yeah, you definitely do. And, if you have those physical gifts and you have that power, Nathan McKinnon is the guy you watch for. And then later on in the day, I talked to Caden McGregor, who was the number one overall pick in the OHL draft. And he also said Nathan McKinnon was the player that he likes to watch the most because of the way he moves up the ice, the fact that he is a two-way guy. So, the next generation, a lot of them love McDavid, certainly, but there's just as much love for Nathan McKinnon out there as well.
Well, then Ryan, also, it's more realistic to model your game after McKinnon than McDavid. Let's be honest. I know McKinnon is just ridiculous how skilled he is and how he can skate, but how many young guys can be like, yeah, I want to be the next Connor McDavid? It's just like, you can't, right? It's like saying, I want to jump like Michael Jordan, right?
Right.
Well, I think the thing with McKinnon too is that one of the things that gets a lot of attention is his work ethic and his training and his preparation and the things he does off the ice. Not to say that those aren't gifts, but those are things that you can set as goals for yourself. You could say, I am going to train this hard, versus waking up and saying that you're going to skate like or have the gifts and the shiftiness and the abilities of McDavid. I mean, those feel like more God-given talents that you just truly have to be blessed with. It's a little harder to aspire to something like that versus just being a grinder, working as hard as Nate does, playing the game like Sidney Crosby does, because that's who he modeled his game after. So maybe this is going to be this next generation of Nate looked up to Sid. Now these younger guys are looking up to Nate. Obviously, again, top of the list, we've got McKinnon, McDavid. How about for the defenseman out there? Number 3 coming in, Cale Makar. Talk a little bit about making that decision for him being obviously the top D-man, which was reinforced this year by him winning yet another Norris.
Well, and I think that's it, right? Like when Cale Makar is on the ice, he's the best in the world. And, it's not just the points. I think that's the big thing. And Paul Maurice actually mentioned this during the Stanley Cup final, where he was talking about some of his defensemen that don't put up a ton of points and saying like, oh, if the Norris voting wasn't just about points, you'd see more love for like a Gustav Forsling, for example, for Norris. But I think Cale Makar escapes that criticism because he is so good in his own end as well. He's so good with his stick. Like, he's not a physically dominating defenseman. Like, he's never going to be Chris Pronger, but he doesn't have to be because he's so smart. He's so quick. He's so good with his stick that he makes things happen in his own zone. And of course, we know what he can do in the offensive zone as well.
I feel like the difference between Makar and Hughes is getting a little wider. And, nothing against Quinn Hughes, who, Katie's, sorry to jump the gun here, but we've got him sixth on the list here, which, is pretty high. Let's face it.
Yeah.
But I just feel like the gap between Makar and Hughes, like going into this past year, you pretty much were, slicing it down the middle in terms of who was going to have the better season. But I just feel like, when all is said and done, we're going to be holding Makar to a totally different level and a different category when you're talking about some of the all-time best defensemen.
Well, let's wrap up kind of this top 10 discussion. So we just said Makar number 3. We've got Leon Draisaitl 4, Hellebuyck, the goaltender, at 5, Quinn Hughes, Nikita Kucherov, Andrei Vasilevsky, Matthews, of course, and Kaprizov. So that is the top 10. Guys, when you look at this, what were some of, I guess, maybe the criteria? Because I'm sure there were a lot of very difficult decisions on who to leave out of a top 10 when you've got still so much talent. Starting off number 11, we see Matthew Kachuk. What were the main factors that distinguish who was top 10 versus the rest?
Well, one important thing about this list when it was put together is that we didn't want it to just be all forwards at the top. And we also wanted to stack positions against each other. So there was a certain amount of forwards, a certain amount of defensemen, a certain amount of goaltenders. And the way the list worked from there is, okay, just like with, as Mike mentioned, with Cale Makar, it's like, well, who's after Makar in defense? Well, it's Quinn Hughes, right?
Okay.
And then you go from there. Same with the forwards, McKinnon, McDavid, Draisaitl. Like those are all obvious names. Then you get to your Matthews, your Kucherovs, your Kaprizovs, and so you see throughout the list, everybody is kind of slotted with their positions along the way. So the top goalies, there's going to be a couple in the top 10, and then you'll see them sort of, put throughout the list until you get to sort of 91, 100. Same with defensemen, same with forwards. So a lot of it was weighted on what happened now this past season and a little bit of historical greatness, obviously, but also how they stacked up against their peers.
I like it. All right. Well, talk to me a little bit then about how much you weighed things like championships. So we got Matthew Kachuk kicking things right off at number 11. How much of that is what he brings to his team, the impact he's had being a part of Florida, they're winning, versus just what he does maybe on an ice level? From a stats perspective, maybe it's not just about numbers. For someone like him, maybe you're choosing him to be as high as he is on the list for other factors.
Mm-hmm. I definitely think that's part of it, especially because at the time, the Panthers were the reigning champs. Now they're the reigning back-to-back champs. But you do have to consider, like, why do you play the game? You play the game to win titles. And a guy like Kachuk that is so good at it, a guy like Kucherov who has won cups, a guy like McKinnon who has won a cup. Those are important factors when thinking about the overall impact that a player has, particularly when the games get tougher.
Yeah, it's a good factor. I mean, again, it's not always about, we had the anniversary yesterday of the Kachuk trade, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the show. But again, things that on the surface didn't seem like from player to player perspectives that big of a deal. But then you figure out who Matthew Kachuk is. All of a sudden, the impact becomes a big, big difference. All right. Well, Michael, kick us off with this first question as we look back at our top 10. Which of these players that's in the top 10 that hasn't won a Stanley Cup yet will be the first one to win one?
That's a good question, because obviously you got a couple Oilers there in McDavid and Draisaitl, and Connor Hellebuyck, at number 5 hasn't won a cup, and talking about the reigning Hart Trophy winner, and that's the only thing he hasn't won. I'm gonna probably show my true colors, Katie, and not surprisingly, I'm gonna say Austin Matthews. And
there it is.
Ryan and I were discussing this with the rest of the staff the other day about who do we predict is going to be in the Stanley Cup final. And in the West, I've got Vegas. And in the East, I was the only one to say Toronto. And I just feel like that's a team now that Marner is gone. I don't know what to expect out of them, but I like what they've added in the offseason. And I could see, maybe some of I don't know if some of the pressure's off of Austin Matthews, but it just feels like they've made their big move in, letting Marner go. And I'm going to stick with the Toronto Maple Leafs. I think Austin Matthews gets a cup before, McDavid gets one, before Quinn Hughes gets one, before Connor Hellebuyck gets one.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of guys in this top 10 that are absolutely excellent players that have not won yet. So you got a lot of choices. And I like that you say you don't know what to expect from Toronto, but that might not be a bad thing because for the last few years, we knew exactly what to expect, which was losing in the first or second round. So embrace the unexpected with the Leafs getting into this season. All right, Ryan, who's your pick?
I'm going to go with Connor Hellebuyck. I think that Winnipeg, even though they're in a very difficult division with Dallas and Colorado, I do think that they play at a very high level. And yeah, they lost Nikolai Ehlers in the offseason, and that's tough. But Hellebuyck, I mean, he's the reigning Vezina winner and the Hart winner. And yeah, he had his troubles on the road in the playoffs. It was very obvious. Luckily, you can do something about that, right? Like all these players nowadays have their sports psychologists. He has a whole season to think about, mentally what he needs to do to be better on the road. And I don't doubt that he can do that. I mean, he is an elite goaltender. He has everything you would want in an NHL starter. And Winnipeg's still a very good team. And, what we've seen is a lot can happen in the West. I mean, maybe this is not the best example, but the Jets almost lost to the Blues immediately, right? Yeah. And would we have been surprised? No. So should we be surprised if Winnipeg goes on a long run next season in the playoffs? I don't think we should. I think Hellebuyck can be that difference maker. It's just a matter of refocusing himself.
Yeah, I mean, it was a tough draw for the wild card spot, no question.
That was such a crazy playoffs when you look back at it. That series against St. Louis, obviously, what a comeback the Jets had. And then that Dallas series was just bonkers with the way that Rantanen played. So you're right, Ryan. Like for the same reasons why, Toronto, you could say, like, had they won Game 7, who knows, maybe they were playing in the final. Same thing with the Jets. Like, had they got past the Stars, you're like, okay, well, was that the sticking point for them?
Yeah, I mean, if they are going to get there, then the one guy that has to do it for them is Connor Hellebuyck. So certainly he would be, I think if they make it that far, he'll probably be getting a Conn Smythe as well. So we'll see what else he can add. All right, well, we obviously have a long list of players, right? We're not going to list every single guy that's in the top 100 for you. But guys, talk to me about players that are not on this top 100 list who we think this season could be jumping onto it.
Can I start?
Go for it.
Sam Bennett is somehow not on this list. And I think I checked it 3 times. I'm like, how did Sam Bennett not get on? And then I realized, okay, this list was made before the playoffs, basically. Right. So we didn't get to see Sam Bennett, score his 15 goals and 22 points and win the Conn Smythe. But, along with Sam Bennett, Brad Marchand also, maybe it's an age thing, but he didn't have a great regular season, I guess. And then goes to Florida and then tore it up in the playoffs again. So, those for me are the 2 obvious ones. If I had to guess which one is making on the list, if you had to do it again next year, it's probably going to be Bennett, not Marchand, because Bennett, is a lot younger and he's just in a great spot in Florida where I think for sure he's a top 50 player, never mind top 100.
Got his fresh new deal. He's feeling real good. They're looking for the 3-peat.
Yeah, I'll stick with the Panthers and go with Seth Jones, who was a revelation in the playoffs. And again, because of when the magazine came out, most of Jones's recent track record had been with the Chicago Blackhawks, who obviously are kind of in a trough right now and trying to build their way up. But, when Seth Jones got to Florida, we saw the Seth Jones we were more familiar with early in his career with Columbus and also in Nashville when he first broke in. The minutes he played for the Panthers, the 2-way game he provided was just exceptional. And I think that now that you see him in a situation where he doesn't have to do everything and he actually has guys to play with, particularly Nico Mikkola, who was a tremendous partner for him with the Panthers during that run, I think Seth Jones is back to being one of the better blue liners in the NHL.
And then if we're looking at goaltenders, Ryan, like I wonder what the decision making was when you came down to Jordan Binnington, because obviously there's Jordan Binnington in the regular season and even the World Championships, and then there's Jordan Binnington when he's playing at the Four Nations or even
Right.
in the playoffs where he looked great again. But he's going to be a guy that I think goes into the Olympics as Canada's I would imagine it's probably going to be either him or Logan Thompson as the number one. And I think it's Binnington's net until he loses it. So here's another guy that I think, if we're talking about this, at this time next year, maybe Jordan Binnington already has a gold medal from the Olympics. So he's for sure a top 100 guy.
You're gonna be
Yeah, that's a great point. And obviously Hockey Canada is very confident in Binnington. I mean, Doug Armstrong knows him as well as anybody possibly can at a brass level. But he is so fascinating because like Jordan Binnington could give up like 6 goals to the Blackhawks and then shut out Team USA and nobody would be surprised.
He's a gamer. He's all about those big moments. Certainly wouldn't hurt to head into the second half of the NHL season with a gold medal around your neck. A little extra confidence boost for the final stretch. All right. Well, how about this? Guys who are currently hanging out, hovering maybe towards the bottom of this top 100 list that might not be making the cut and could fall out of it.
I'll go with Erik Karlsson.
Yeah, you go, Ryan. Yeah. Erik Karlsson.
Yeah, I mean, Pittsburgh, I don't think our expectations are too high for the Penguins this year. And if you look at Erik Karlsson, he went from like over 100 points with the Sharks to like 56 with the Penguins the season after, then 53 last year. I think, he has this pretty great reputation and well earned. I mean, he's going to be a Hall of Famer once he retires. But if you're looking at the NHL right now, if you're looking at a defenseman who puts up, let's say 45 points and is like a minus 20, is that a top 100 player in the NHL? Probably not.
I'll stick with defense. I'm going to say Alex Pietrangelo, just because, he may not play again this year.
Right.
I have a sneaking suspicion we'll see him game 1 of the playoffs. But even then, you got to remember him along with Drew Doughty and Erik Karlsson and John Carlson. These guys are not getting younger. So this might be the last time all 4 of them end up on a list like this. The other name, I guess we'll see how well he fits into the system, but Nikolai Ehlers, going from Winnipeg, where that's been his home since he's been drafted, to now Carolina, where how many players have gone to Carolina? We expect them to be the same player that they were in their previous homes, get there and just don't fit in with Rod Brind'Amour's system and how the rest of that team plays. There's a guy that could easily go from being a 70 to 80 point player down to a 40 to 50 point player. And you're just going, whatever happened there, Nikolai Ehlers? I thought he was supposed to be the answer, the difference maker. Well, he can't play in the system. So, that's another one I would look at.
Rod Brind'Amour hockey. It is definitely not for everyone. And I think it's a reason why, they have, historically maybe had a little bit more trouble attracting some of the free agents that they wanted. Obviously, you couldn't keep Mikko Rantanen in there for the hot minute that he stopped in Raleigh. So we'll see what it does for Nikolai Ehlers' game. All right, Ryan, I want you to kick us off here because you're going off the board with this one in terms of the best player who is not included on the top 100 list. He's not even in the league yet, but he's going to make a splash pretty soon. What do you got?
Yeah, I went with Gavin McKenna here. He's not even drafted yet. We'll have to wait basically a calendar year for that one. But I mean, the skill that this kid has is just incredible. And it'll be very fun to see what he can do against NCAA competition in the upcoming year as a member of Penn State. So, yeah, I'm going to go with Gavin McKenna. Obviously, he can't be on the list next year because he won't be in the NHL yet. But in the future, I have a feeling that Gavin McKenna will be firmly ensconced in the top 100.
Great use of ensconced. All right, Michael, what do you think?
I'm going to go a little younger, or sorry, a little older than McKenna. I'm going to go with Matthew Schaefer, this year's number 1 overall pick.
Nice.
I don't know if it's going to happen immediately, but he's probably going to end up on this top 100 list if Ryan if everything that Ryan says about Schaefer is correct, and the Islanders are betting big on him. Obviously, they moved Noah Dobson. I think Schaefer, if he ends up playing in the NHL this year, which it looks like he's going to get every opportunity to stick with the Islanders, he's going to get a lot of minutes, and we could be looking at a guy who does what Lane Hudson did for Montreal this year and just comes in and uses his speed, uses his offensive instincts, and makes a real big impact for the Islanders.
I like it. Giving the young kids some love. All right. Well, how about this? Which player do we think will jump the most spots when next year's top 100 comes out, Michael?
You know what? I was kind of surprised that Sasha Barkov was so low, and nothing against the list, Ryan, because let's face it, Katie, this is a tough exercise. Never mind narrowing it down to 100. Even when you get down to the top 5, top 10, top 20, it does become, I'm sure there were probably shouting matches within the THN offices here, but Barkov is a 3-time Selke winner. Obviously, he's won back-to-back cups as the only Finnish captain to do so. And right now he's ranked 19th. I imagine if Florida gets to the final or even goes on a deep run and Barkov adds more hardware as a top defensive forward, you probably could see him in the top 10, maybe replacing Kaprizov there.
All right.
Fair enough. I'm going to go a little further down the list. Jake Sanderson, the Ottawa Senators blue liner, came in at number 88. And it feels like we're at the point where Sanderson is like about to take that big leap. Like he's already taken a leap and he's still so young in his career. But I feel like we're getting into territory where Jake Sanderson is going to be in the Norris conversation for years to come. So, like I said, right now he's number 88, but with another strong season, I could easily see him jumping up like, a couple of echelons. And, obviously you still have those top end guys like Makar and Hughes and Zach Werenski, but I feel like Sanderson is he's working his way up into at least that conversation where maybe next year he's in the 50s or maybe even the 40s.
Yeah, he had a great 4 Nations, Ryan, and obviously for Ottawa, he's going to be huge. Here's a question for both of you. Lane Hudson or Jake Sanderson, who has the better year next year? Because Hudson was ranked number 100, and here's another guy that I could see him going right into the top 50.
I'll say Sanderson because my only concern about Hudson would be a sophomore slump, which comes for even the best of players. We mentioned Nathan McKinnon. He certainly had one. So if we're talking about next year, I'll go with Sanderson having the better season.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, but I think it's more a reflection of the incredible start that Hudson had, like setting the bar so high, doing what he did. It almost is inevitable that, he is still starting out. Sanderson's been building for a little bit longer in his career. Hudson is still starting out. The sophomore slump is an apparent thing. But I think that maybe if he had just had a really solid start, you just expect that to build. But it's almost like he killed it right out of the gate. Can he keep replicating that? Because then you're really talking about some crazy numbers, 2-3 years down the road for him. But it'll be interesting to see. All right, how about this from rookie standpoint? Which rookie could have the best chance heading into this next season of making the list first, Ryan?
I'm going to go with Alexander Nikishin from Carolina. He got a bit of a cameo at the end of the year and got into some playoff games with the Hurricanes. And he's an older rookie, right? Like I think he's 24. So he'll still be Calder eligible, but he obviously has all that KHL experience. And he was so good back home in Russia. I think we saw glimpses of what he can be. And I say glimpses because he just didn't play that many games yet for Carolina. But, you can see the product and it's very exciting. So I think Nikishin has a pretty good chance of really rolling up some numbers in Carolina, especially, they have some guys that are offensively inclined, but Brent Burns is gone now. So, I think Nikishin can find a pretty good spot for himself in that Hurricanes top 6.
That's interesting. I'm going to continue to give love to Habs fans out there. Ivan Demidov. We saw, you're talking about, a glimpse, Ryan, with Nikishin. Basically we saw 7 games out of Demidov. I thought he was noticeable every time he was on the ice. He's a top 5 pick. I think that, Montreal got a steal when they got him at 5 overall. This is a guy that, he brings a lot of skill to the table, a lot of confidence, and I really like what Montreal is building here. Like with Hudson, with Slavkovsky, now they're bringing in Dobson. He's coming into a perfect scenario. I think that Marty St. Louis has done a great job with their young players, and I could see Demidov just completely taking off and being that next big guy to go along with Suzuki and Caulfield, who are obviously on this list as well.
I like it. A lot of expectations for the young guys. And we've obviously talked about so many great players. Some of them are on new teams. Some of them will be picking up right where they left off. But when you look at teams as a whole, there's teams on paper that look amazing. And then there's teams that hit the ice and they actually end up amazing. I know we talked all about how on paper, Nashville looked like they were going to hit it out of the park last year. That didn't exactly happen. So guys, I want to ask each of you in this next little segment here, teams on paper who we think could actually exceed expectations versus teams on paper who have the chance to underachieve. Why don't you start us off, Ryan?
Yeah, in terms of exceeding expectations on paper, I'm going to go with the Columbus Blue Jackets. I think they exceeded expectations this past season as well. But we were just doing our annual predictions for the THN yearbook, which will be out in about a month. So keep an eye out for it. And I sensed that, not a lot of guys were really up on the Blue Jackets. And I just feel like it's a group that works. Like they don't have superstar names necessarily. I think Zach Werenski is close based on, what could have been a Norris Trophy season last year. I mean, he lost, but he was in the mix. Adam Fantilli is still growing as an NHLer and will probably take another step. Sean Monahan was a fantastic pickup for them and has really sort of been a glue guy and a very important veteran for that team. So I feel like the Blue Jackets play better than they are on paper. Conversely, when I look at the Vancouver Canucks, you look at the marquee and it's like Quinn Hughes, Elias Pettersson, Thatcher Demko, and they miss the playoffs. And we know all the drama, right? And JT Miller, obviously, no longer with the team. But even so, like with the top end talents they have, you feel like the Canucks should be better. And they're going to be fascinating because they brought in another big name in Evander Kane in the offseason. And that could either be a home run or an absolute strikeout. And I don't think there's anything in between. And so I feel like on paper, you're like, ooh, power forward who could, maybe get you 30, maybe even 40 goals. But it could also not work out. So we'll see what happens with the Canucks.
Yeah, for the team that, and again, Ryan and I were in this discussion about like which teams do we think are going to make the jump into be a playoff team, and I'm pretty high on Anaheim right now, and I think that they could be one of those wildcard teams that come out of the West. And on paper, you're looking at them going, okay, well, they grabbed like some older players and Granlund and Kreider, and they've got Quenneville behind the bench, but it's mostly still the same cast of young guys that were waiting to break out, and we keep asking ourselves, when is it going to be Mason McTavish's time? And, is he even going to be an Anaheim Duck when the season starts? Because there's always these trade rumors, but I'm high in the Ducks. I think they're a team that, I don't think the Pacific is that dangerous. I think that it's a pretty top heavy with Vegas and Edmonton. And then after that, I'm not so sold on LA and Vancouver and Calgary. So I think there's an opportunity there. In terms of the team that looks pretty good on paper, that could take a step back. I don't know why I'm saying this, but I'm going to say the New Jersey Devils. And I just think that, you look at them on paper and you're going, what a defense. They've got some older guys. They've got a great cast of young players. My favorite, old Seamus there, or Seamus Casey, I should say, right? But we'll see if Jack Hughes can stay healthy. We'll see if Sheldon Keefe can put it all together. But if there's a team that could end up, taking a step back, I could see New Jersey doing so, and especially when I look at their goaltending.
Right. Well, it certainly will be interesting. Let's keep the paper discussion going and talk about Michael's favorite team to discuss. Not favorite team, but his favorite team to discuss.
Yes.
The Maple Leafs. Are the Maple Leafs worse on paper after the start to the summer they've had, the moves that they've made, or do they have a better shot at winning the Cup now?
Okay, they're worse on paper because you can't take a 100-point player in Mitch Marner, who also is a Selke, candidate every year and who kills penalties, and expect to be better. You don't replace them. That being said, I think they are a more balanced team. I really like the offseason that Brad Treliving had. They got Nick Roy, which I think is a perfect bottom six guy. Dakota Joshua, I think, is going to be the perfect complement, especially for a team that already has Matthew Nyes, and I'm expecting a monster year out of Matthew Nyes. So I actually like what they did. Let's not forget, if Anthony Stolarz doesn't get hurt against the Florida Panthers, that could have ended up completely different, that series. And their defense, while not splashy, while not offensive, I think it makes a lot of sense. So this is a team where I'm looking at them going, regular season, you might finish third, but in the playoffs, I don't know who wants to play the Toronto Maple Leafs anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And I think the big X factor for the Leafs on paper right now is who picks up the slack in the top six. And they do have some options on the wings. Like, is it Easton Cowan? Is it Nick Robertson? Is it Bobby McMahon? If it's none of those guys, then at least you can make a move early on and make some kind of hockey trade to improve yourself, because it does feel like the Leafs are pretty close to taking it to the next level. And I think Matthew Nyes, that was a perfect example by Mike there. Like, that's a player who, okay, he's not going to get 100 points like Marner, but he's going to continue to build and incrementally get more points. And that's going to help Leafs. And the fact is, like, Matthew Nyes plays playoff style hockey, and that's something Toronto needs as much of as they can get.
We've heard all about wanting to change the DNA, right? Well, getting a piece of the DNA like Marner out of the mix and adding all these other small pieces, that's certainly changing it. Now we just have to see, is it changing it for the better? Will that be what they need? I like the word balance, though. I think that is going to be a big thing that is sort of an emphasis for the new Toronto Maple Leafs without Mitch Marner. So we'll see. All right. Well, how about a team that made quite a few moves, whether it was at the deadline, during free agency, maybe both, that should be not necessarily saying they're going to be great, but they should be exciting to watch, that they're a team you're very intrigued by heading into this season?
Mm-hmm. I really like the Habs, and I keep saying it, but the Noah Dobson trade was great. Forgive me, who did they trade Logan Mailloux for again? But for St. Louis,
Bolduc.
Bolduc. Thought that was a good move, and I think it's more or less. I'm excited about the young guys, like I mentioned Demidov earlier. They still got Slavkovsky. Caulfield had a big year last year. I think Suzuki really came into his own. I wouldn't be surprised if Suzuki ends up on Team Canada's Olympic squad as well.
There at the end of the year.
Yeah, even Montembeault played a lot better as the season went on. Like in the first half, you were going, this is the guy that they chose as a third goaltender for the Olympics. And then in the second half, you're going, oh, yeah, this is the guy they've chose for Team Canada, because he did look a little better. So, I don't know if they're going to be, top 3 division good, or it's still going to be a fight for them to get into the playoffs, but they're going to be a fun team to watch.
Mm-hmm. And to your point, Mike, Montembeault, I think he was one of the best in the league in terms of goals saved above expected last year. So certainly, especially in that second half, he was crucial for Montreal. I'm going to go with Carolina. I mentioned Alexander Nikishin already. And I mean, he wasn't a free agent. They drafted him. And we talked about Nikolai Ehlers, who I think he'll be okay because he's coming from a system team in Winnipeg and going to another system team. So I'm assuming he'll be all right with Carolina. I understand what you were saying there, Mike. But then also they got Keandre Miller on the back end. So that'll be very interesting because to me, Keandre Miller, already a solid defenseman, but still with a lot of potential to unlock. And I think, Carolina is a pretty good place to do so. So I don't know how far the Hurricanes can go in the playoffs yet, but they're going to be fun to watch to see if they can make finally a big run in the Rod the Bod era.
I'll make a prediction here. I'm gonna go Rod the Bod. I'm gonna go out on a limb. I'm gonna say conference final, Ryan. Maybe they could get there.
See it. Yeah, I can certainly see it.
Because that's what they always do. They just get to the conference final.
Rod the Bod is going to physically carry them there with all of his incredible strength that he gets from his workouts. All right, how about Tampa Bay? Do they need to do more? Did they do enough? What do we think? Are they trending in the right direction regardless of the moves that they made? What do we think about this team?
Yeah, that was a team, like, it's weird. Like you're saying on paper, and you look at the Lightning on paper, and oh boy, like just their forward group alone, when you're talking about Kucherov, Braden Point, Gensel, Brandon Hagel, who had a monster year last year, and Anthony Cirelli, who we're talking about snubs for the top 100. The guy finished third in Selke voting and didn't make the list. And, again, that's a testament to how strong the top 100 players are. But I didn't think they needed to do anything in the offseason. Like, they do have a good roster still. I think Vasilevsky, as long as he doesn't take a step back, they should be fine. I almost feel like the last 2 years were just a product of, they'd been to the Cup final 3 straight years. And I think that is a lot of wear and tear. And the last 2 years were an example of that. So I'm happy with what they did, which is not a whole lot. I thought the Yanni Gourde contract extension was one of the smarter moves made in the offseason. So, I'm expecting them to be, a lock for, one or two in that division.
And then they made those moves at the deadline, bringing in Bjorkstrand as well. He ended up getting hurt, but they obviously are very high on him. I think that's another one that, like, kind of almost like you forget about because he didn't get to play. Bottom line, they ran into the Florida Panthers too, round one. Not an easy thing to do. It'd be very interesting to see what it would have looked like if they had played somebody else. What do you think about the moves or lack of moves in Tampa as a whole, Ryan?
Yeah, I'm okay with it. And, you mentioned Bjorkstrand. Health was a big part of the end of Tampa's season. And, the injuries that they announced after that Florida series were brutal. Imagine what a healthy Lightning team could have done. And I don't know if, some of those injuries might have been against the Panthers. But,
there's always a few.
That was a rough series when you think about it.
Yeah, totally. This is a team that needed rest. They're a veteran squad. They don't have a lot of young talent, but if they can come in fresh, I think they have the opportunity to make a bit of a push. And, if we get another Tampa Florida series, especially early on in the playoffs, like if that was the first round matchup, it's funny. I know a lot of people picked Tampa last year to beat Florida. I went the other way. But this time I might actually take the Bolts over the Cats because of the rest factor and assuming that Tampa Bay is healthier this time.
All right. Well, hockey fans, remember, you don't need to break the bank on sticks when you can get a pro-level composite stick without the pro price tag. Visit Stix.com. That's Stix.com to make sure you go and check those out. All right, guys, let's get into some rapid fire. I moved this question down from our last segment, but should the Florida Panthers still be considered Cup favorites after bringing back Marchand, Bennett, and Ekblad? Yes or no?
Yep. At least one of the favorites. I mean, they have the recipe.
Yeah.
So as long as they're healthy, once the playoffs roll around, they know what they're doing, and it's difficult to beat.
I think the key for them, and I agree with you, Ryan. I say yes, they should be considered the team to beat. I think the key for them, though, it's going to be an Olympic year, so that a lot of their players are going to be at the Olympics. Is really that load management. And they did it perfectly at the end of this past season where, Kachchuck basically after the Four Nations, we didn't see him again until the playoffs. Brad Marchand, again, he took some time off, and Aaron Ekblad got lucky with suspensions. And yeah, exactly. So if they could kind of work that again, because I think they're a good enough team where you could take 3 guys out of their lineup and they're still for sure a playoff team. That is going to be the key, I think.
Yeah, I mean, even Reinhart towards the end of the year was, nursing something, taking a few games here and there. I mean, they put themselves in a position to be able to do it. They're a team, like we used to say the same thing about Tampa, right? Like they don't care where they finish once they get in. They know what to do. They know how to turn it on. And I think it was a risk, like we all weren't sure. Okay, well, are these guys that haven't been playing going to be able to step in game 1 of the first round and be ready to go? And there was enough support that it almost didn't matter. And Matthew Kachchuck somehow got better, even though he was still hurt. He got better as it went on. I don't even understand that. That guy he's a conundrum in and of himself. But yeah, they're definitely the team to beat. So we'll see what the other guys have to say about it. All right. Well, yesterday was the 3-year anniversary of the insane trade that rocked the hockey world on a Friday night between Florida and Calgary. Matthew Kachchuck to the Panthers for Huberdeau, Weegar, prospect Cole Schwindt, and a first-round pick. So where does this rank on the list of all-time crazy blockbuster trades?
Since the lockout era, like I always say the lockout era, because that, can't go way back to, I know the Leafs and Flames orchestrated a deal way back where it was like 14 players and like Doug Gilmour went from the Flames to the Leafs. I'll say it's pretty high up there. Was it 10 players?
Yeah.
Okay. That's
Gary Leeman went to Calgary.
Yeah, that is a lot of players. This one was huge because I think at the time everyone thought it was one-sided in Calgary's favor because they were getting Huberdeau and Weegar, and Huberdeau was coming off just a monster year, and Weegar, like he was. I think didn't he not set a record for like most points by like a right winger or something that year? But now you look back at it, and it's just completely changed the fortunes of the Florida Panthers, and really. When you think about Panthers hockey, it begins and ends with Matthew Kachuk. So, yeah, I would probably rank it maybe first or second.
Yeah.
I would say it's up there. I think the Taylor Hall Adam Larson trade was a huge shocker. The 1-for-1. But I will go old school and say Phil Esposito for Brad Park back in the 70s. That was such a shocker because, Brad Park had been a Ranger his whole career, and he thought Bruins fans were going to kill him when he got to town because those teams were such big rivals, and Boston fans hated him. But, of course, once he put on the black and gold, they embraced him and loved him as a defenseman. But that was a massive trade.
Yeah. I like these hockey trades, though. Like, remember, like, Shea Weber for PK Subban was another one that was just, like – and then even last year, like, Mikko Rantanen getting moved was such a shocker. And, it was one where we're looking back at it now, like Marty Necas, he's also a top 100 player on this list. Colorado is still a dangerous team, even though they lost Rantanen, who was just so good in the playoffs.
Yeah, the ones that you're like, I remember where I was when that happened. Those are the trades. I was working a Robert Morris University hockey game. I was standing on the glass. I'm like, stop whatever you're doing. This is the most important thing that's happening in the world right now. Mikko got traded. Crazy. All right, let's blow through these last couple. We had a deal reached between Seattle and Kako. They avoid arbitration, agreeing on a deal for 3 years at $4.525. Yay or nay?
I'm a yay on this one. If Kako can't prove himself in the next 3 years, I think that we've probably seen enough. But if he does, then Seattle will have a very good, probably middle six winger for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, he's been a bust, right, Ryan? Like second overall guy, hasn't scored more than 18 goals, never had more than 40 points. Pretty much a bust. So this is cap.
We're getting into like it's almost you can almost put the stamp on it.
I think so. So this is his last kind of prove me deal. He's got to show something here, and Seattle needs as much offensive scoring as they can get because they're a pretty boring team. Like Matty Beniers isn't going to jump out at you with his offensive stats, and neither is Shane Wright. So they really do need a Kako to kind of seize this opportunity.
All right, last one. We'll wrap it up on a fun note. Adam Fox is featured in an ESPN promo for the Naked Gun reboot with Liam Neeson on a scale of 1 to 10. How stoked are you for this movie?
I'm absolutely 10 out of 10. I'm at the point now where I don't want to see any more trailers because I don't want to spoil any more jokes. The ones I've seen are incredible. I'm ready.
I'm with Ryan 100%. Like Ryan and I both love the Airplane movie. I
Oh,
love
yeah.
all the Naked Gun movies. So I think Liam Neeson, although it didn't sound like, you're going, Liam Neeson's going to take over in this role. And you're like, yes, Liam Neeson's going to take over this role because he's hilarious. And
Oh, yeah.
I love the trailer so far. So, you know what, Katie, I'm more stoked about this than the Happy Gilmore 2.
Oh, come on.
I
Well,
am.
we're never going
Yeah.
to agree on that because I got my calendar all set for Friday. Happy number 2. I'm very excited. Don't be mad. I've never seen the first Naked Gun, so I'm going to go watch that before I see this new one because I have seen some of these trailers. I'm excited about it. I love Liam Neeson, and I love him in funny roles. I love his cameo he made in Ted. Do you guys remember? Was it Ted
Oh,
or
yeah.
Ted 2? The Trickster for Kids. Like he's just like because you think of him, he's so serious in all those Takens and all the crazy movies that he's done. But I'm very very excited to see this and get my first taste of the Naked Gun world. But it'll be fun. We'll see what it is. But again, Happy Gilmore 2 coming out Friday. It's going to be epic, and I don't care if it's absolutely awful. I'm still going to watch it. I'm still going to say it's great because I love Adam Sandler, and you'll never convince me otherwise. All right, guys. Awesome stuff. Very good. Lots of good hockey talk. Lots of good movies coming up. That does it, though, for this episode of the Hockey News Big Show. Thanks, as always, to everyone for joining us. We will be back again next week. For Michael Traikos and Ryan Kennedy, I'm Katie Gaus. We'll see you guys soon.